How's it going, YouTube? Coming to you today with another video, and today, guys, the video is going to be where to hand trap. Now, I love doing this series, and it's absolutely my favorite because a lot of people really don't have the time to sit down and grind hours of this game. I understand that completely, but it's still very fun to play, and it's even more fun to play when you're prepared, and you can actually make the right tech choices in your deck list. The number one thing that we think about with deck building is usually your hand trap lineup, right? So that's a major part of what goes into tournament preparation, and I really do hope that today's video helps you out. If you haven't already checked my sponsors over on Gem, Cloud, Arla, Imperium, Dragonshield, RW, MainPhaze, and Grimoire, definitely go ahead and do so down below in the description. If you want one-on-one coaching, definitely go ahead and check out my METAFY link down below also. And then subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, so we can hit our goal at 30,000. I love the ride that this has been so far. Thank you all so very much for the support. Where to Hand Trap has been such a flagship of the channel, and it's something that I will continue to do to help out everyone that I can. So without further ado, let's hop right into our first slide. The first one I have for you today is going to be Fiendsmith Yummy. Now, this deck has been extremely popular lately. It just won the Vegas Regional, it just topped several others, and I know that it's been popping up in YCSs as well. So this is a deck that you want to make sure that you're prepared for. Yes, Yummy by itself is not really that great anymore, but with another engine, it's still very strong, and the engine itself is very good. So the number one thing, too, is if you're playing Rock right now, which you probably should be playing at least 1 or 2 copies of Rock in your main deck. If your opponent goes for the Princess Engraver on board before they make a Caesar, that is where your Rock is dedicated to. You have to stop it there, or else you're dealing with the Caesar, and your Rock is irrelevant. With Bell's another card that should be in your main deck right now. If you are dealing with a Yummy matchup, the best spot for Bell, honestly, is in a chain link. So let's say that your opponent ends with like a Synchro on board, which is usually how we're seeing the Yummy end boards right now. You activate a card, they go to chain the Synchro, chain Bell. And then at that point, they have to burn like a surprise getting other Synchro on board, or trying to get back to like a Snatchy to be able to go ahead and Synchro again, right? So a well-timed Bell can really interrupt the line of play. The other thing too is if you can just straight up banish the Snatchy, I know they can return it with like a field spell, but the deck has so much less looping right now, and especially the fact that Yummy Snatchy is the way to get to a field spell. So it's really awkward if you go ahead and just get rid of the Snatchy, because now they're going to be at very limited options, and it's going to be really strong for you. You can also hit like an Engraver when it's coming back to the board if you're fearful of like a Caesar and you don't have Rock. So that's also a really good spot that you can throw something like DD Crow. You're always going to use the Ogre on something like Mignon, of course. There is going to be a line to go ahead and just hit the Riperdocus if you're really worried about your opponent getting to their Fiendsmith line. But I really like hitting the Cupsy because of the fact that it's not just getting to your surprise, you're also getting to field spell, you're getting to other Yummy names. Cupsy just represents so much, and it's something that you want to make sure that you deal with immediately. That's why I'm also saying that it's pretty good to Ash the Cupsy, because this is the one that you definitely want to go ahead and get rid of. If your opponent does start the Fiendsmith line, and again, you don't want to deal with the Caesar, you can always go ahead and just like Ash the Requiem. But if you want to stop the actual engine that you're worried about, stopping the Cupsy is a really good way to go about it. Again, being able to cut off access to surprise, and we all know that card's like so broken, so that's a card that you want to make sure doesn't get to be added. The next one here being Radiant Typhoon. This one's pretty simple for hand trapping, to be honest. The two big monsters in Grave, the Phonix and the Varun, if you just chain DD Crow to these to get them out of the game, right, that's something that you want to go ahead and do. These cards can be pretty insane interruptions, especially the Phonix. So go ahead if you have DD Crow and just get rid of these. Ash or Bell onto Crocea. You can hit Vision with the Ash, but like Crocea is the number one target that if you have an unchain blocked Crocea that you can go ahead and just stop, you should, right? This card is just crazy advantage. Ogre on Mandate, of course. Mandate's crazy, just get rid of it. And then the link to Varun, Valor Imperm, to stop your opponent from getting to Mandate, right? You don't want them to be able to set that up at all. Now, Lunalight is seeing a lot more tops, and it's doing very well. Valor Imperm on the Gold Leo is always going to be your number one, or Ash on Silverhound, of course. And then Bell or Ogre onto Masquerade Wolf. On either of them, they both work, because they're either banishing from Grave, they're adding back to banish from Grave, or they're just activating on field, right? So Either or works. It's most likely going to be Masquerade. I've been seeing a lot less Wolf lately and more Masquerade, right? So definitely just make sure that you're going after one of these, and you'll be in a really good spot. Now, if you're going to be using Nibiru in this matchup, you're usually chaining it to Poly, and it's the one after the Perfume Dancer, and it's when your opponent has the Kaleido on board that's already copied the name of Leo Dancer, because when they go to rip the Poly, they can't just like hard summon a Liger that way, right? And they're going to lose the name, and a lot of times they'll lose the ability to even fuse, unless they have like another Perfume Dancer that they're forced to go into. And the other one too, if your opponent's able to like add back Poly off Masquerade and they go to rip Poly to go ahead and banish from grave, just chain DD Crow and banish the Leo Dancer so they also can't summon Liger. This is really important too because a lot of times they're only playing like 2 Leo Dancer. So if you can go ahead and clear the 1, then your opponent can only maximum summon 1 Liger, and that's pretty easy to deal with. Now, we're not a stranger to Dracotail and how popular this deck is. If you have DD Crow, you just hit the target of Urgula, which is usually 5 mana. The Urgula will go back and you'll banish the 5 mana. Sometimes it's like a Lucius, but just get rid of the target. Nibiru here is kind of worse, but it's okay if they start with the Fallen cards because they're going to be putting up things like Cartesia, and you can just go ahead and wipe the board. So if they start a normal Dracotail board, it's not really going to be useful. If they start the Fallen, it's going to be very good. The Bell can be reserved for the trap cards, usually like Flame or Horn, whichever one's going to hurt worse, right? Or like Sting, because that card's really good. Being able to just go ahead and stop the trap cards is really strong. Now, Ash, you can hit Branded Fusion, but I always feel like Rahu is better because they're going to be able to get to things like Urgula and another trap card, right? So hitting the Rahu has just always been pretty ideal. Using Ogre on the Dark Dragon when it goes to banish itself, and Valor Imperm on Lucius, I will die on this hill. I think that is just correct. If your opponent normal summons Lucius, I'm hitting it every time. Better open 5 mana, right? Like, you better have it. Magnet Warrior. Now, this is a deck that everyone's like, what do I do against this deck? So, it's usually fiendsmith Magnet Warrior. You're going to want to go ahead and Nibiru again on the Necroclippic Engraver so your opponent doesn't get to Caesar. Magnet Bonding is the best card in this deck. You want to bell the effect diffuse because it shuffles back. Make sure that you're belling this and you don't let your opponent get to this. Now, I mentioned this in my last video, is that we're going to start seeing Quackimiro cards in this deck when this deck actually gets optimized, and we're already starting to see things like Guardian in the deck. So, something that you do have to keep in mind that could be a part of the new end board. DD Crow onto the beta, so the Sigma Plus, I believe, in the bottom left-hand corner of the beta, when that card gets sent off the level, I believe it's level 10, it's a conduction. The summon condition, you summon it by sending 2 from deck to grave. You send the Sigma and the beta, and then the Sigma revives the beta, and then you just go ahead and DD Crow with the beta, so your opponent doesn't get that to board. You want to Ash the Conduction Warrior. This one's really strong, being able to get to things like Bonding. You don't want that to happen. Don't use Impulse on this deck unless you're very confident you're going to win, because it's really awkward when your opponent has Conduction on board and everything turns to an Earth and you Impulse your opponent. You no longer can activate your effects because everything's an Earth and you can't activate Earth effects. So make sure that you are very, very careful with how you Impulse this deck. Otherwise, you're in a very awkward position. You want to go ahead and Valor Imperm the beta. This is the best one. You're also able to get to the level 4 that allows you to fuse as well. So you want to make sure that you cut this off. And then also you can just hold Imperm for your own turn to hit the Naturi Beast, so you don't have to worry about that. Nibiru is a very interesting card for this matchup. It's definitely like Nibiru and, right, unless your opponent didn't open up K9 cards. Because if you have like Nibiru and Imperm or Nibiru and Valor, then you're going to be able to stop the Ripper and clear the board, right? Otherwise, it's a pretty dead card. But you can still catch people off guard pretty well, especially if they hard open, just like the Vanquish cards. DD Crow onto the Lantern target, or just hit the Lupus, right? I think that's perfectly fine. If you hit the Lantern target and it's early on, you're in risk of just like getting a Zunid, right? But if you wait for like the Lupus after you activate like a hand effect, then you're in a really good position, then everything's targetable, right? So something else to just keep in mind. You can Ogre the Soul Start, which is the absolute best spot to Ogre in this deck. You also can just like Ogre the Lupus, right? And then banish it at that point, because when it leaves the field, it'll get banished. And that's really strong. You want to Bell the Rock so your opponent doesn't get back to attributes, or like a Holly Sue if they put it in grave. and then Ash on Rosin, and then Imperm on the Ripper. And it only works Imperm on Ripper if they don't make it with the Lupus. A lot of times you'll see people just go like normal Leroy, summon a Lantern, and if they're worried about Droll, they'll immediately make the Ripper and then Ripper search, and then on the second Lantern they'll search. That way you just play around Droll, right? So Ripper is not always going to have Lupus. It's only if it's made on your opponent's turn, because at that point they'll be using Lupus. But stopping the Ripper is really strong, especially if you have Nibiru, right? So that's something where it's going to be like an and hand trap. But hitting the Rosin with like an Imperm feels like a waste, just because a lot of people right now are playing like 2 Borger and a Caesar, and it just feels so bad to just like waste a hand trap. And I know it's really similar with like the Lucius, but I would almost rather save it for more guaranteed stops like Ripper, so your opponent doesn't get more to their engine than need be. Pro or Bell on Land Soldier I feel like is honestly the best. You can Bell Necro Slime just because it's another fusion and you don't want them to be able to fuse as much as they want to. But Land Soldier is like really solid for this deck, and it's something that you want to make sure you stop. Ash or Ogre onto the Dark Contract with Zero King. Get rid of this. Make sure that your opponent cannot use this. It's a very strong card. It gives your opponent a lot of advantage. Valor Imperm onto Gilgamesh as always. You can hit the new one, but like, again, just getting double free scale is pretty strong, and it's something that I still just don't want my opponent to be able to do. So for you, Bell, we actually saw 1 top, which is really cool. This deck is so strong, but it just gets beat by the Charmies the worst right now. So we'll have to wait and see what the deck can do moving forward. Valor Imperm onto Spirit of Yubel is really strong. This is the one that gets you just things like Nightmare Pain. Make sure you stop this card in particular. You can Ogre the Nightmare Pain, of course. This is the best one to stop. But you also defensively can Ogre the Soul of Rage, so that your opponent can't use your monster to go ahead and link off, right? And that's a really strong one. Yeah, they can like Yama it back, but it can only activate once, so like who cares? A lot of times if you Ash the Samsara and they don't have like Fiendsmith extension or something, they're just gonna lose. Bell onto the Abominable, and then of course Nibiru in the same slot we've been talking about with Fiendsmith. Just make sure that the Caesar doesn't come out. And then DD Crow preemptively on the Grave Squirmer, so your opponent doesn't get back to a free monster and go for like a Verudgerous, right? So something that you don't really want to see. Orcust, this deck has been popping up a ton. It's Orcust as a Mina. We're going to be preemptively DD Crowing like a Harpor if your opponent summons like a Gearsu, right? And you want to just get rid of the Harpor immediately to cut them off from free extension. And then you have the Gaze target that you can go ahead and DD Crow, i.e. the D mod, so your opponent doesn't get to the Dragoon. Bell onto the Wanted Poster, Ogre onto Deception, Ashing something like Harp Horror, and then Valor Imperm onto Gearsu. It's all pretty standard here. And the last one here today is going to be White Forest, and again, it's going to be the target of Gaze. Just don't let your opponent get to Dragoon. Bell onto Wanted, Ogre onto Deception, and then Ash the Elzet, and Valor Imperm the Sylvie. This deck has been popping up quite a lot lately, so just make sure that you're prepared for it. I really hope they enjoyed today's video, and if there's other videos you want to see soon, definitely comment down below in the comment section. And if you haven't already checked out my Twitch, Twitter, Discord, Instagram, or subscribe to the channel, definitely go ahead and do so, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Thank you.